Most people assume Johnson became famous simply because he pointed a camera at tractors, and almost none of them are right. Nobody involved, including Zach himself, saw any of what was coming. He grew up believing he would spend his entire life quietly farming the same stretch of west central Minnesota his family had worked for generations, with no expectation that millions of strangers would one day recognize his face, his voice, or the particular way he talks about a soybean field in late July. Then one small, almost accidental decision changed the entire trajectory of his life, and behind the viral clips, the booming harvests, and the smiling family moments that followed, there was a much bigger and far less obvious story unfolding, one that most viewers never got to see. Johnson was born into a farming family in Lowry, Minnesota, a family that had worked that same land since the 1870s, which made him a fifth or sixth generation farmer, depending on how far back the count goes. Farming was never presented to him as a career choice. It was simply the shape of the world he was born into. Long before YouTube existed, the expectation running through the family was straightforward: keep the operation moving forward the way the generations before him had done. Social media fame, brand sponsorships, and a subscriber count in the millions were nowhere near anyone's imagination. By April of 2016, something had started to wear on him. He kept running into the same wall of online negativity aimed at modern farming, arguments accusing farmers of being careless with GMOs, pesticides, and the environment, as if the people growing the food had no stake in the outcome themselves. That framing never sat right with him, because it ignored a basic reality of his own life. His kids swam in the same lakes his fields drained into. His family drank from the same wells, sitting beneath those same crops. The people farming the land were also raising their children on it. Yet that part of the story rarely made it into the public conversation. Instead of trying to argue his way through comment sections, he did something simpler. He picked up a phone and started filming what farming actually looked like, without a script, without expensive equipment, and without any particular plan beyond showing the truth as plainly as he could. Those first videos were about as unpolished as content gets. Spring planting, equipment prep, the ordinary rhythms of daily farm work, filmed exactly as it happened with no editing tricks and no narrative arc imposed after the fact. Nobody expected the footage to reach much beyond a small group of curious viewers. The first video that generated any real attention brought in a payment of $92, an amount that felt almost absurd at the time, a strange little sum of money earned just for talking into a camera about corn. It wasn't much, but it proved something nobody had confirmed before. People outside the farming world were actually interested in watching this. Nobody watching that first small payment land could have guessed what it was about to turn into. The real shift came in the fall of 2017. A video documenting harvest preparation crossed 100,000 views within just 3 or 4 days, an unheard of pace for a channel about cornfields and machinery. Massive combines rolling across real fields pulled in an audience that had never given farming a second thought, many of them living in cities and suburbs with zero connection to where their food actually came from. For a lot of those viewers, it was the first real, unfiltered look inside the industry responsible for filling the shelves at their local grocery store. Subscribers started arriving fast. By the end of that harvest season, the channel had jumped from roughly 7,000 subscribers to 30,000. And it became clear that interest in agriculture reached far beyond farming communities themselves. Setting a goal of 100,000 subscribers by the end of 2018 felt ambitious for a channel built almost entirely around cornfields and machinery. That goal didn't just get reached, it got obliterated. The channel closed out 2018 with more than 200,000 followers, a number that caught everyone off guard, including the person standing behind the camera. But the engine actually powering that growth wasn't fully visible on screen, and this is where the story starts to surprise people. While Zach became the recognizable face, driving the tractor, walking the fields, and narrating the day's work, it was his wife, Becky, who quietly became the architect running everything behind the scenes. Becky had no background in video editing, social media strategy, or business management. She had worked as a daycare provider. And yet, Almost overnight, she had to learn all three at once, because the alternative was watching the whole project collapse under its own weight. Farm days already started around 6 in the morning and often stretched past 11 at night. During planting and harvest, there was barely enough time to sleep, let alone sort through hours of raw footage. Checking grain dryers overnight, farming full days, and editing content on top of that simply wasn't sustainable for one person. If the channel was going to survive alongside an already demanding farm operation, somebody had to take full ownership of everything happening behind the lens. So a routine formed. Every evening before bed, a memory card came out of the camera and got left behind for editing the next morning. While tractors moved through the fields outside, Becky sat indoors reviewing footage, cutting clips together, writing descriptions, designing thumbnails, and preparing everything for publication. That cycle repeated day after day, season after season, gradually turning a hobby born out of frustration into a professionally run business. She didn't stop at editing either. She taught herself advanced editing techniques through online tutorials, took over the finances, personally negotiated every sponsorship deal directly, and ran the social media strategy across multiple platforms, all without any formal training in any of it. Without her insistence that this wasn't just a side project, but something with real business potential, it's entirely possible the channel would have stayed a curiosity, a handful of videos from a frustrated farmer. Instead of the media operation it eventually became. This is one of the least discussed parts of the entire story. The millennial farmer persona that so many viewers feel they know intimately is really only half of a partnership, and the camera only ever showed one half of the marriage that actually built it. All of this was happening while family life kept moving at full speed. For children filled the household as the business exploded, 3 of them biological, and 1 a niece the family had adopted. School schedules, meals, appointments, and everyday parenting continued running alongside editing deadlines and sponsorship calls. Somehow, threaded between diapers, homework, and upload schedules, a working rhythm emerged that actually held together. By 2019, the financial picture had become impossible to ignore. In a conversation between Zach and Becky, they realized the YouTube channel had generated roughly 5 times more income than the actual farming operation that year. Generations of the Johnson family had worked that exact same land for well over a century, and now a camera pointed at cornfields was out-earning all of that tradition, an outcome that felt both thrilling and deeply strange to sit with. Industry estimates placed the channel's YouTube ad revenue alone at somewhere around $290,000 a year. Sponsorship deals with companies including a farmer's business network, a major tractor brand, and a well-known lubricant company reportedly added anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 per branded post. Merchandise sales moved fast too, with more than 2,000 pieces sold within the first 6 days after launch, and a podcast covering farming topics regularly pulled in 50 to 70,000 downloads per episode. What had started as a handful of unscripted phone videos had turned into a genuinely diversified media business reaching well beyond the boundaries of the farming community. But despite all of that financial success, the moment that actually changed everything had nothing to do with money at all. 2 years into the channel's major growth, in December 2019, tragedy hit close to home. 3 family members, including an 11-year-old boy, lost their lives after being overcome by fumes while working inside a harvest storage silo only 20 miles from the Johnson farm. News of the accident moved fast through the local farming community, a stark reminder of how quickly agricultural work can turn deadly. It was the kind of loss that reached well past a single family, touching neighbors, emergency responders, and farmers across the entire region. Local volunteer firefighters attempted a rescue, but didn't have the proper equipment to make it happen safely. 2 neighbors had already been pulled from a grain bin not long before that, and Minnesota, alongside North Dakota, was leading the country in grain bin-related deaths. For a lot of rural communities, these weren't rare, isolated tragedies. They were recurring risks that volunteer departments regularly faced without the specialized tools needed to respond in time. That gap between the danger and the available equipment became impossible to ignore once it hit that close to home. For Zach, the tragedy exposed a problem that had existed for years without ever getting the attention it deserved. If anything positive could come out of a loss that devastating, it would have to be preventing another family from living through the same nightmare. Not long afterward, a nonprofit called Harvest Outreach launched, built specifically around grain bin safety education and equipment funding. Rather than simply raising awareness through videos and hoping the message landed, the organization focused on getting practical, usable resources into the hands of local departments as quickly as possible. Using videos, live streams, and the built-in audience the channel had already earned, a fundraising campaign launched with the goal of equipping volunteer fire departments across multiple states with specialized rescue equipment, while also funding additional safety training. The response went far beyond what anyone expected. More than $110,000 was raised, funding rescue equipment and proper training across roughly 60 to 70 rural fire departments spread across 13 states. And the impact wasn't just theoretical. Equipment purchased through those donations later helped save a real life during an emergency in Illinois, proof that the campaign had done exactly what it set out to do. What began as a direct response to unbearable tragedy turned into an effort protecting farming communities far outside Minnesota's borders. Behind all of that good work, though, a much harder and far more private struggle kept building underneath the surface. Success on camera came with a cost that almost never gets discussed publicly. A real identity struggle sat quietly beneath every video, every sponsorship deal, and every milestone reached along the way. Farming had always been the core of who Zach understood himself to be, the one constant meant to outlast everything else. Reality told a more complicated story. The YouTube channel kept demanding more time, more planning, more travel, and more business responsibility with every passing year, until more of his week was being spent inside the world of social media than out in the actual fields. Ancestors going back to the 1870s had built an entire family legacy around working that same soil season after season without interruption, and now meetings, sponsorship calls, filming schedules, and content planning were increasingly competing for the same hours that used to belong entirely to fieldwork. Even with that shift, the farm itself never stopped running. Zach's father continued operating the 2,400-acre farm full-time, often absorbing extra responsibility whenever media obligations pulled Zach's attention away from the fields. That support made it possible to hold both worlds together, but it also reinforced an uncomfortable truth sitting underneath the whole story. The business built around documenting farming life was quietly consuming time that would otherwise have gone toward actually farming. There were real worries about long-term stability, too. A single algorithm change on any platform could wipe out an entire income stream overnight, leaving a family business built on borrowed digital ground with almost no warning at all. Unlike farmland or machinery, online success can never be guaranteed. A future with fewer uploads and more time back in the fields remained a real possibility somewhere down the road, but for the time being, two identities kept pulling in opposite directions at once, one rooted in generations of family tradition, the other rooted in an unexpected new life that had reshaped everything about where Zach's time and attention actually went. While that quieter struggle played out privately, the channel's public reach kept expanding in ways that surprised nearly everyone watching happen. Crossing 1 million subscribers and hundreds of millions of lifetime views eventually made Millennial Farmer the most watched farming channel on YouTube. What had started with a phone camera and a desire to push back against online misinformation had quietly become one of the most influential agricultural platforms anywhere in the world, reaching an audience that stretched far past the boundaries of the farming community itself. Research into that audience turned up something unexpected buried inside the numbers. Roughly half of all viewers weren't farmers at all. Urban viewers with no personal connection to agriculture made up a huge share of the regular audience, drawn in purely by curiosity about where their food actually came from. Many of them had never sat in a tractor, walked through a cornfield, or seen a harvest up close. For them, the channel became a rare, honest window into an industry that touches every single person's life while remaining almost completely invisible to most consumers. That shift in who was actually watching changed what the channel meant. It stopped being simply one farmer talking to other farmers and became something closer to a bridge between two worlds that rarely interacted directly. Every planting update, every harvest recap, every equipment breakdown, and weather setback helped ordinary viewers understand the real complexity sitting behind the food that eventually reaches a supermarket shelf. The mission never really changed from that very first upload. Become a genuine, honest voice for agriculture, offer farmer-to-farmer education, and build real conversation between the people who grow food and the people who eat it. Early videos broke down complicated topics like GMOs, pesticides, precision agriculture, and modern farm management in plain, direct language instead of technical jargon. And rather than arguing with critics directly, Zach chose simply to show how modern farming actually worked and let people draw their own conclusions. Clean water was never framed as purely a consumer concern either, because it mattered just as much to the people growing the food who were raising their own children on that same land and depending on healthy soil for every future harvest. That honesty, more than any single viral moment, became the entire appeal of the channel. An authentic farmer, with a dry sense of humor letting total strangers into a world most people never get to see up close. That same authenticity opened the door to bigger projects. In 2019, a podcast called Off the Husk launched with backing from a major agricultural sponsor, regularly pulling 50 to 70,000 downloads per episode and giving longer, more detailed conversations about farming technology and daily life a place to exist outside the constraints of a single video. Family-focused content expanded the brand even further. One video featuring a 10-year-old learning to operate farm equipment became one of the single most popular uploads on the entire channel, pulling in more than 4 million views, proof that viewers wanted more than farming tips. They wanted to watch an entire family legacy get passed down in real time, a layer of emotional weight that machinery footage alone could never provide. In December 2020, a second channel launched, dedicated entirely to family life and a dirt track racing hobby completely separate from farm content, giving audiences a look at the Johnsons outside the fields entirely. Recognition kept building steadily too, including a media award from a Minnesota Agricultural Foundation honoring the transparency and advocacy shown across nearly a decade of content. The platform's influence kept extending beyond entertainment. Farm rescue volunteer work began in 2022, helping farmers facing real emergencies while raising awareness through the very platform that had made all of it possible. A scholarship partnership eventually formed, as well, funding college opportunities for students pursuing agriculture-related degrees. What had begun as a frustrated response to online criticism was, by that point, actively creating opportunities for the next generation of farmers coming up behind him. Most retellings of this story stop somewhere around that scholarship expansion and call it finished, but that's not actually where things ended. In September 2024, a major agricultural publication selected Zach for a special honor recognizing individuals making a genuine difference across the industry, timed deliberately to land during National Farm Safety Week. Turning 40 years old around that same period added extra weight to the recognition, marking 8 full years of content built entirely on honesty over polish. By August 2025, subscriber numbers had climbed past 1.2 million, and Zach was invited to moderate a panel at a major Minnesota farming event centered on the future of agriculture, where conversations touched on something deeply personal, the pride and the pressure tied to potentially raising a 7th generation of farmers on that exact same land. Even after years of online success, protecting that family legacy remained a priority, sitting underneath everything else. Then came the milestone almost nobody else has covered. In May 2026, the channel officially crossed 10 full years online, an anniversary recognized by regional public radio as a genuinely rare achievement in a world of online content where creators burn out or fade out constantly. From a $92 payment for a shaky video about corn to a full decade of consistent, honest content, the arc of the story proves something simple. One honest camera, pointed at real life without a script, can outlast almost anything the algorithm throws at it. So, what really happened to Zach Johnson? Nothing collapsed. Nothing scandalous got exposed. Nobody disappeared from public view under a cloud of controversy. What actually happened is quieter than that, and in its own way, far more remarkable. A fifth or sixth generation farmer, frustrated by public misunderstanding of an industry he'd known his entire life, picked up a phone, kept showing up, and built an audience of well over 1 million people without ever walking away from the work that made his story worth telling in the first place. He didn't chase virality. He documented reality, season after season, stuck tractor after stuck tractor, and let the story tell itself. Along the way, with his wife Becky quietly running the machine behind the machine, he helped fund grain bin rescue equipment that has already saved a real life, gave a platform to farmers whose stories rarely get told, and turned an unpredictable second income into the very thing that helped keep a family farm standing through some of the hardest years American agriculture has faced in recent memory. If there's a real lesson buried inside 10 years of Millennial Farmer, it might be this. The most surprising stories don't always come from a dramatic twist. Sometimes the twist is simply that someone refused to stop telling the truth, season after season, year after year, until the world finally noticed.